All right. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Thank you so much. Thank you to the Innofac show team behind this event for giving us the chance to talk operational efficiency. My name is Willie Legrand, professor at the IU International University of Applied Sciences. I'm located in Germany. It's really an honor here to moderate the next 45 minutes. I do research and writing in the field of sustainability, environmental management, and hospitality real estate for the past 20 years. Today, I'm joined by a wonderful group of experts, particularly as they represent various sections of the hospitality value chain, from the owners, the brands, and the consultants, which I will now introduce in turn. So first on my list is Harman Narula, who's one of the founders of Canary Technology, a hotel technology company with a specialization on digital transformation. And that includes also contactless solutions, which obviously coming out of this pandemic is increasingly important to both operators, but also guests. Harman worked as a management consultant before, as well as for Starwood Hotels in the past. Welcome to you, Harman. And also joining us today is Biran Patel, who is the chairman of the Asian American Hotel Owners Association. Now, if you don't know this yet, probably you do, but the AHOA it's one of the largest owners association in the US with 19,500 members, correct me if I'm wrong, owning almost one in every two hotels in the US. Welcome, Biran. It's an honor to have you as well today. And then third and finally is Ron Paul, and is joining us as a senior vice president and chief operations officer for Best Western Hotels and Resorts, looking obviously over the smooth operation of the brand and franchisees over the 100 countries I think you are involved in. Welcome as well, Ron, and thank you for joining today. Now, for those who are wondering, another in a website, also Christopher Punteri, Chief Operating Officer at Iridescent Hotels, was supposed to join, but he could not join today, the panel due to an emergency. So to get started, I'd like to welcome Harman again, founders of Canary Technologies, for an intro presentation. As the session sponsor, Harman, the floor is yours.
Thanks so much, Willie. Appreciate it. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Very nice to meet you. As Willie mentioned, my name is Harman. I'm one of the co-founders of Canary. Happy to kind of introduce the panel here and be a part of the group discussing an extremely relevant topic in terms of operational efficiencies for hoteliers. I think it's no secret that the past 18 months or so have been an absolute roller coaster for the industry. And while the road to recovery will certainly be challenging, I think we're already starting to see the demand come back and the surge in travel in certain parts of the world, which I'm sure Biran and Ron have also seen. I think just recently STR released some data for the US, noting that the occupancy is back up to somewhere around 60%, with a rise expected now in the coming summer months as well, which is fantastic. And while that recovery is going to be fragmented across different geographies, I think hotel operators are already facing an unprecedented obstacle, which we've never seen in past cycles, and that's the shortage that we're seeing in labor, right? I don't think we've seen as fast a rise in demand coupled with such a scarcity for labor in any of the past cycles. So with the pandemic, I think hoteliers are being forced to, not only furlough and lay off millions of workers as they kind of close the door to some of their properties, but with the demand now returning, only a fraction of those workers have actually come back and returned to work. A lot of these former hotel employees have either left the industry for careers in less cyclical businesses, or perhaps have been slow to return due to caution for COVID, and many others, as I'm sure a lot of the operators on the line are weighing their return to hospitality versus other benefits that they might be eligible for right now. But with that said, with demand coming back and seeing this surge in travel and staff levels severely depressed, I know hoteliers are looking for creative ways to fill the labor shortage, and that's something that we're going to spend time discussing on this panel. And while I don't think there's a silver bullet for hoteliers to fix the current staffing issues, there are a number of tools, which I'm interested to hear from Biran and Ron on, that hoteliers are deploying to help drive efficiencies in their hotels and meet the evolving guest needs. As a quick kind of plug for Canary, we're proud to be helping thousands of hotels across the globe in more than 65 different countries drive a lot of these operational efficiencies and better meet the guest needs during these challenging times. As a quick, for those of you not as familiar with who we are and what we do, our mission here is to help hoteliers thrive through innovative technology solutions. And we provide a host of different solutions to help drive operational efficiencies and guest-facing workflows across the spectrum of all types of properties, whether that's luxury and upscale or economy and mid-scale properties as well, where we specialize. For a quick sense, we work with some of the most notable brands in the world in more than 65 different countries. And the solutions are really focused on helping save time at the front desk, increase revenue through things like upsells, improve the guest experience, and decrease fraud, which a lot of owners are seeing an increase in right now. On average, we've seen folks that are utilizing some of our solutions, like our contactless check-in solution, are seeing about a 20% jump in productivity from their current team when they're utilizing the right tools, and allowing them to focus more on the hospitality and servicing the guests than some of the more administrative functions at the property. We also do provide some solutions, such as our #1 rated digital authorization solution, which helps replace paper credit card authorization forms. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to the panel. Just a quick introduction for Canary here, but I think at the end of the day, there's going to be no silver bullet that we're going to be able to kind of get through the challenges facing the industry right now. But there's a number of tools that we can help provide to help mitigate a number of these challenges. So I'm looking forward to jumping into the discussion here with the other panelists, and I'll turn it back to you, Willie, to kind of get the discussion started.
Perfect. Thanks very much for that. We'll come back to this. I think the staff shortage, and I think Ron is probably going to tell us a few things about that as well. And also the combination staff shortage versus what can we do with tech. But first and foremost, and I turn to you, Ron. So you're Senior Vice President, Chief Operation Officer for Best Western. You have a global reach, 100 countries or more. And travel is picking up quite unevenly. We were just talking about this before we went live across the globe. The US is seeing some nice pickup, etc. What's the situation, just before we go into the details here, in terms of recovery across the globe? Are there regions where the situation remains critical for now? And do you get that info from your hoteliers as well?
Yeah, Willie, absolutely, and agree completely with what Harmon prefaced this discussion with. The U.S., we've been very fortunate, especially in the leisure segment, that demand has been very strong in the spring and summer. We anticipate outpacing even 2019 levels, at least from a revenue perspective. Interesting, the pundits, when first talked about the recovery, everyone talked about the U.S. recovery being occupancy first and rate would then follow eventually. And I think we've seen a complete reversal in that, at least in our brands, where rate is extremely strong, but occupancy is lagging slightly. So we're very fortunate from a U.S. perspective, and certainly that's tied to the rollout of vaccinations. But we don't have to go too far north or south to see that there are tremendous challenges. Canada is locked down. A lot of U.S. and Canadian demand is cross-border and just unable to do that based on the current quarantines there. So we feel the pain with our Canadian hotel owners of what they're struggling through. The same is very true in Asia. Asia is pretty much locked down as well, unless there's some domestic travel in Japan and some in China. There's really no travel there, and the end in sight is going to be at least through the end of this year and probably in the beginning of next. India is struggling, and Baran can probably share some additional insights that they're seeing from their members in India. Europe is really, as you know, it's different pace based on the vaccinations, and that really plays such an important role in this recovery. Even if it is only the first vaccination, its percentage of success is greater than what we're used to in a flu vaccine. So it gives people comfort as long as the governmental agencies and control allows people to travel across those borders once they do get vaccinated. So it is an uneven recovery. U.S. is certainly leading it because of our strong domestic pent-up demand. The rest of the world very much still struggling, and we certainly feel that.
Okay, so we'll come back to this as well in terms of the operational efficiencies, depending on where you are and which stage you are at with this pandemic. I'd like to also turn to you, Byron. So, chairman of the Asian American Hotel Owners Association, one of the largest owners association. We mentioned that before. Now, we know that the relationship between owners and operators, they were put to test through the pandemic. I haven't followed so closely what the situation was like in the US with this, but in Europe, in Germany, particularly, where we have lots of lease agreements that are still the norm. So there's been a struggle to strike the right balance between contractual agreements and common sense in sharing the burden of that pandemic, to be honest. Now, as an owners association in the US, what are the pain points still to expect in 2021? And how does the sort of the owner operator partnership looks like when you're going through a crisis? And perhaps you can give us an update now on the situation.
Yeah, thank you, Willie. Thank you for Innofac for having me today. When it comes to the owner operator, our membership is diverse in where we have some members of ours or hoteliers who are owner operators where they're hands-on in the day-to-day operations. And then we have a good amount of our members who have management companies who have kind of overlooked multiple properties and different portfolios. But I think that during this pandemic, it has made the owner operators and the relationship with owner operators, but with their managers even better, because we have tried to cut anywhere we could to cut costs while revenue had dropped drastically. And as my fellow panelists mentioned, one of the biggest issues right now is labor, and owner operators are having to do different things in the hotel, whether it's front desk or maintenance or even helping out with housekeeping, because there's such a drop or demand in labor. There's not enough workers. So now what's happening is whoever we have on staff, we're having to cross train them and just fill in whatever roles we can. And I mean, I've heard of several hotels who have had to close a good amount of rooms down. While the demand has gone up, the pent-up demand, as Ron mentioned, is up, and the summer months are going to keep picking up. There's not enough people to clean the rooms. So people are paying overtime, and people are having to close rooms because they can't get enough rooms cleaned in these high demand times, especially some of these weekends. The holiday weekend right now, we just came through Memorial Weekend, and people were sold out, and some had inventory left because they didn't have the rooms clean. So I think that, back to your question, Willie, that it's the owner operators are doing, they're cutting costs wherever they can. But with wages going up, and I don't see them going down anytime soon, we're gonna have to make it in other ways.
Is the fact that wages are going up, I'm just jumping here, I had something else in mind, but I want to pick up on this. Is the fact that wages going up enough to attract people back to this, or have we simply lost staff through this pandemic that have turned their backs to hospitality? Is there anyone that wants to jump on that one?
I'll give you my take. I think it's to be determined. When the stimulus and the unemployment benefits start going away, that will give us a better idea of what's going to happen. What's happening is that why we're having to pay our employees more right now is because we need to retain what we have, right? And when we come back to where the unemployment's not there and the benefits aren't there, we're not going to be able to give those employees less money again because the pool widens. So whoever we've locked in at, let's say $12, $13, $15 an hour, we can't start giving them $9, $10 an hour anymore, right? I know there's several states here in America who have come up with an earlier date to not give unemployment or the benefits. The date initially was early September. I know here in Texas and several other states, it's ending in the end of June. And that's going to give us a better idea of how many people are going to start coming back to the workforce.
Is that what you see as well, Ron?
Yeah, I do. And Baran was right on, is we cannot incent people to stay home. And that's quite honestly what a lot of this unemployment is doing. Arizona, like Texas, put requirements in there that you have to have proof that you're out looking for a job and can actually get an incentive if you take one. That's what it's all about, and that's what I believe most Americans want. However, when they're incented to stay home because they can make, you know, almost as much money, that's the wrong thing. And I do believe that the jury is still out on whether people have actually left the hospitality industry. I think there's a lot of people that look forward to coming back, and certainly in the big cities like you know, New York and San Francisco and Chicago, where they're just great destinations. There's a lot of challenges going on in those cities that even compound the problem even further. So, but I think our industry is live and well. It's the first time ever coming out of a crisis that we've seen, you know, this long-term impact on hotels and being able to recover. The fact that we have to develop revenue management strategies around, do I have enough rooms clean to, you know, accommodate the demand, is something we've never seen before. And we have to get past that and let hotel owners and operators, you know, do what they do best in their markets, which is run a hotel and provide a great experience for traveling customers.
Are the owners, operators, and again, I pass this not necessarily to anyone in particular, but just generally speaking, are the owners, operators, there seems to be a bit of a divide between what's happening in the US versus what's happening in the rest of the world at this point, because you have some pickup, you see your rates going up, you've just mentioned it right now, the rate pickup is actually very good, bypassing what you had thought was going to be the occupancy. But in many other places in the world, we're not quite there yet. The hotels are struggling and they're looking for any type of efficiency they can get at this point with little occupancy. What have been the actual strategies that you've put forward to your owners, operators over the past 12 months, and those that are currently not seeing that recovery yet? What are the tools out there for those hoteliers that are not seeing that recovery? They're not seeing the guests yet coming back, at least not in great stride. What are the advice you give them? And I put this out.
I can give my perspective on this, or my take on this. You know, we're seeing this fragmented recovery across the board, across the world, to be frank. I think you kind of nailed it, Willie, in that, you know, it's great. The US is definitely seeing the pickup. You know, I mentioned kind of the STR data that's out there now, and Ron and Yaron were alluding to this too. They're seeing certain properties are starting to see a significant surge in travel, but, you know, other parts of the world, especially, they're just not in that, they're not on that upward trajectory yet, I think, right? And it's expected in certain places that have come out, or, you know, knock on wood, have come out of the pandemic to some degree, while other places are still kind of getting the ramp up there. We're seeing people, you know, very similar to what we saw in all geographies in terms of March and April last year. There's a lot of thoughts around different strategies that hotels are employing, whether that's like things that Biran was alluding to. Is it, hey, can we operate with only a part of our inventory and we can run that pretty efficiently, perhaps? Is it perhaps, is there certain new revenue strategies that we have? Is there a way to drive additional ancillary revenue? I think one popular thing, I know Marriott's been talking a lot about it as well, is this idea around renting out, you know, facility space for non-hotel usage, right? So thinking about flexible space when it comes to meeting space, we've seen that across the board as well. And then the last piece, you know, at least from our perspective, is we're just seeing hotels are trying to find ways to do more with less, right? Even the hotels that are seeing the surge in travel again, it's, you know, I think a little bit of the you know, the straw that broke the camel's back is a little bit in the pandemic when people think about technology as well. You know, there tended to be this digital transformation that was occurring in hospitality, but the pandemic has really led hoteliers to recognizing the adoption can actually help them drive their bottom line when they're especially in feeling this labor shortage that they're having right now. So there's different technology out there that I think people are looking at, and I'm curious to hear from Ron and Biran if that's something that they've seen their owners and operators adopting as well in terms of trying to optimize for the current environment.
Digital solutions, has this been something? Obviously, we've seen a lot of this contactless technologies coming through, and that's driven by the fact that obviously to give this sense of confidence to the consumers, etc. But are there more? Have you seen, Ron, or perhaps from the owner operator, Byron, have you seen more interest in digitalization also as a tool to add value to the customer experience, but also as operational efficiency within your business in terms of tech or any?
I absolutely is the answer to that. It's about being selective of what technology you need at what point in time and what the customers expect. I think from an operational efficiency perspective, text messaging platforms and different ways to communicate with customers is very popular and preferred, especially even if people don't want to touch the phone in their guest room as they went through the pandemic, they could easily text message the front desk, and it provides much greater efficiency for an operator to be able to do more than one thing at a time when you've got a platform that creates that ability. And then with the contactless check-in, I think that's something that we certainly are learning to get better at and still create a customer experience. So yeah, you have those, but where the adoption I see is much slower, and that's in the mobile key and mobile check-in, because it's I know that these platforms are evolving, but it actually creates more work oftentimes for a customer rather than less, and you've got to get to a frictionless experience for the customer that it saves them time or effort or something to make that work and still meet the concerns of a hotelier, meaning that, well, if you have to have that credit card on file to make sure that that there's no disputes on payments and things of that nature. Yeah. So we're working through that, knowing exactly in this world of human trafficking and everything that bad can happen, who is actually staying in that guest room. So I think as brands look at this, we've got to identify what's a good solution that protects all of those involved and provides a better guest experience for the customer and creates greater efficiency for the hotel operators. This pandemic has certainly opened our eyes to where and how we can do things differently, whether it's through technology or just evaluating all of the services that we've provided for many, many years.
Byron, same thing in terms of digitalization or use of tech?
Willie, I think that it depends on, which industry segment you're in, right? I think the independent and economy segment, not as much. It's still more hands-on. When you go to higher industry segments, they're going a little bit more technology based. You get the mobile entry, check-in kiosk, opt-in, opt-out housekeeping. Because when you talked about in the past of, different parts of the country are not there yet. And I think that there's two factors to that. One is, how do you get the consumer confidence back, right? Here in America, the consumer confidence for the most part is back because of our vaccination program, right? There's a good amount of people who have gotten vaccinated that feel comfortable going out now, right? And that has kind of caused the pent-up demand and more confidence of people going out and eating at restaurants, going into hotels, where other parts of the country, other parts of the world are not there yet, right? I know Ron talked about India. There's a big situation there with COVID, and they don't have enough vaccinations. And, we're trying to get our government to kind of help out with the extra vaccinations that we have here, people who aren't getting vaccinated, to help out in countries like that. But back to technology, I think that, it's going to have to go more technology based to cut cost, right? If we went back to what it was pre-pandemic, then our margins are shrinking, right? And I think that to save those margins, we're gonna have to kind of go technology-based or more digitalized in several different areas in our hotels.
I just wanted to jump on that because we were often talking about technology that are front facing to the customer, the added value, et cetera, the experience. But in fact, there's a whole range of technology that are non-consumer driven, that are about your utilities, about your energy, about the actually savings from the back of the house, et cetera. Now, has this pandemic also waken up some hoteliers in terms of where the savings can be done, in terms of non-customer facing technologies. Ron, have you seen, I mean, have we seen sort of better control on utilities and things like that happening over the past 12 months? And is that something that's going to stick now, or?
I think two things. Yes, we're all more aware. I mean, energy costs are a huge part of an operating expense for hotels. So, what type of options are there available through, laundry is, probably one of the biggest cost areas when we look at laundry usage, and the whole housekeeping service approach, or limited housekeeping service approach through the pandemic, was something that saved hotels energy and staffing, and continue to do so. So, we continue to evaluate that to understand how receptive our customers with continuing a minimal level of housekeeping service. That, from an environmental perspective, when chemicals and water and energy usage, it's tremendous. And our average hotel is 100 rooms. For the larger properties, the expense is astronomical. So putting in place, operational processes like that I think the customers are accepting of, or given options, I think that's a great opportunity for us. On the non-customer facing, but also hotel facing, is the revenue management platforms continue to evolve with machine learning and a lot of new reporting capabilities that allow us to make better business decisions about the current demand that we have, or what the demand looks like in the future, and how we react and respond to that. So through this, while we've continued to look for operational efficiencies, we've spent a lot of time looking at how we can provide easier booking, and then how we can better analyze the information that we have available to us to make better business decisions for the future.
So moving forward, we will probably have to balance this operational efficiency that's cost driven, which means we could technically cut down some complementary services that we had offered the customers pre-pandemic, that now we say through the pandemic we've cut those down. Now are they coming back on, etc.? These will be the questions. In fact, I'm linking this to the question that's being asked by the audience, and the question is, how do you balance the struggle between luxury and frugality? So and that, who wants to pick that one up? Who wants to, how do you balance that luxury and frugality?
Well, Willie, this is the struggle that not only the brands like Ron have, but hoteliers also. Pre-pandemic, I feel like because of the competition amongst brands and to put the best product out there, we have somewhat spoiled our consumer, okay? And one of the hottest topics amongst our members in our association is breakfast. Mm-hmm. There are certain brands that have so many items in breakfast, right? And when one brand has that, does another brand try to compete and have a similar type of breakfast, right? And it's a cost to the owner. I know a lot of brands during the pandemic went to a grab and go type format that helped out. Now, is that there to stay, or are we going to revert back to pre-pandemic type breakfast? Right? I was speaking to another brand's leadership, and I said, hey, you all have like 60 plus items in breakfast. Is that really needed? I know that the consumer wants breakfast because we've spoiled them, but can we not modify it? Right? Why do we need that many? Why do we need 2 attendants for breakfast when we can barely get 1? Right? So these are the challenges that we have, where we don't want a customer or giving us a bad review because they're not getting the expectations they did pre-pandemic. And how do we train that consumer or customer to go with the new norm, whatever that new norm is? That's the challenge we're having.
I could see that this is what you've just said, Baron, is exactly what's happening, in fact, in Europe, especially in Germany, that is focused so much on breakfast. If you've been here and you've had the breakfast buffet, you probably know. I turn to Ron. Do you follow the same logic as well in terms of this luxury frugality and the struggle between those two, and perhaps retraining customers? I don't know if we can say that, but realigning perhaps the expectations somehow.
I think it is a little more troubling to achieve that in the luxury segment. If a customer is paying $300-400 a night, there's a certain level of service and expectations they have, and certainly the hotels throughout Europe are recognized for their outstanding breakfast. But there's a fee associated with that in almost all cases, where in the U.S. in the mid-scale and upper mid-scale segment, it's a buffet that's complimentary. So so yeah, at the luxury level, it's a different game, and we see that. We own World Hotels, which are 300 luxury and upper upscale hotels around the world. Unfortunately, most of those have not reopened to any extent, but that's what they do, is they provide great service and great products. So I think that's very difficult, but completely aligned with Baran in how we achieve that in the upper mid-scale and mid-scale segments is something that we absolutely have to look at. We are not, we're not in the food and beverage business most times here, and it's all dictated by, is the competition going to try to outdo the other so they can try to steal market share, and then that's balanced with how customer expectations have evolved. And I think if we can find some common ground on that as an industry, to say, you know what, we don't need to be all things to all people for breakfast. We need to provide a good breakfast. We need to look at how we can reduce the operating cost with probably fewer products and maybe fewer hours and set up and tear down time. I think there's efficiencies that we can create in that model that still give the customers a really good experience and compete that way.
In fact, from the academics point of view, and if we look at the research, the data that shows from the scientists and from the research, there are really two big factors that drive efficiencies. It's either a high competition, which is what we have in hospitality, high competitiveness, or a crisis. I mean, those two things. Now, we just happen to have both at the same time. So these are drivers of efficiency. I turn the question it's another audience question to you, Harman. How much ROI can hoteliers make with digital keys or contactless keys? So here's a question that's directed to you, please.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a couple of lenses here also just to think about. I think Buran had hit on it and Ron had both hit on it, right? I think not all solutions for all types of properties, right? It's different segments, it's different types of customers, different needs. I do think that piggybacking off the last discussion though, the customer expectations have evolved, both from things like the breakfast and F&B offerings to what's included with the stay to what sort of digital experience they're actually going to have at the property. I think there's a spectrum though, and certain properties, there's a higher expectation from the guests for other types of properties and so forth along the board. In terms of ROI, I think there's a few different ways that hoteliers have been thinking about this in our discussions with them and so forth, right? It's not necessarily just you either just increase operational efficiencies or you find a way to drive additional revenue and increase the guest experience. I think hoteliers are now actually thinking about this much more holistically, where you can actually do all, right? Like you can do these things. They see technology as a source of improvement, as a source of good for them to actually help solve a number of these workflow problems that they have and drive their bottom line. So it varies, honestly, from an operational efficiencies, average room hotel, average 100-room property is saving somewhere around 40 to 50 front desk shifts in a month, just given the reduced amount of time that they're able to spend on the check-in process. And this is just check-in. I'm not talking about the mobile key aspect that I think is its own discussion. And I see Ron shaking his head there. I think that's a longer discussion to talk about whether or not you want to be allowing folks to be utilizing a mobile key right now and what that takes from a hardware perspective and so forth. But simply removing some of the administrative components that front desks are currently going through, collecting things like IDs and payment information and reg cards and so forth. That allows hotels to save a lot of time. But I think more importantly, it not only meets the guest experience, but gives an opportunity to be in front of your guest before they even arrive, right? Ancillary revenue has turned into a massive revenue stream for everyone from economy properties to upper upscale and luxury properties. Obviously on a different spectrum, very frankly, but we're seeing a lot of economy properties see significant amount of revenue driven through ancillary spending. They're selling things like parking, or perhaps they might have some beer and nuts behind the front desk, and now being able to put that in front of guests before they arrive has turned into a legitimate revenue stream for them as well. So apologies, I can't give you this is exactly what it's going to be like for your hotel, whoever may have asked the question. It really varies by type of property, segment, and then what you're actually enabling for your guests to be able to do.
Is this
Well, and I would also like to just add to that, the
Yes,
technology side is also the in-room technology side. And,
Yeah.
you know, customers, I believe throughout my career that they always, their minimum expectation is, well, I have this at home, so I expect at least that, if not more, in a hotel room. And, you know, the streaming and casting and all of the different technologies that they have at home are expected, and we really need to continue to evolve those platforms pretty quickly to satisfy customer expectations.
You were talking about ancillary revenues. Is that something, obviously, hoteliers have been thinking about this left and right over the past 12 months. Same thing. So you've said that there's been an increase. Have we become more entrepreneurial when it comes to this, to think beyond just beds and food and beverage in this case? Have you seen a shift in the minds of the owners and the operators in terms of how they run their business and where they actually try to see new revenue streams? Is that something that's been that you've noticed a difference? Biran, maybe you've come across sort of entrepreneurial initiatives as well that you want to share?
Well, I think that it's still the exception rather than the rule, but even mid-scale and upper mid-scale hotels have bars in them now. You never saw that before, and a lot of people coming off the road want to have a beverage when they return to their hotel in the evening. So we've seen ancillary revenue there. We've seen ancillary revenue with markets, you know, actual food markets within the lobby, small, but have a variety of food offerings and can make money off of that. But I'll tell you the one that we've seen the greatest success in, and it's been more so coming out of this pandemic than anything else, driven through technology, as Harmon mentioned, is pre-arrival, would you like to check in early or stay late? And charging $25 for an early arrival or late departure. And hotels are making hundreds, if not thousands of dollars additional a day, because customers want to be able to check in at 10 o'clock in the morning, so they have, you know, the full long weekend experience and not check out until 3 o'clock on Sunday afternoon. And hotels are driving a lot of revenue. And again, that's in one of those tools of technology and revenue management of how you get the most from a customer while they're staying at your property.
Yeah, I'll piggyback off that real quick, Ron, because I think, you know, I didn't mention that in the upsells, but, you know, we have a lot of data on this, because as a part of that digital experience, to even check in, guests have the opportunity to upsell. Early check-in is by far and away one of the most productive ancillary revenue streams for every type of hotel. You know, obviously the charge is very different. Economy hotels, you know, they might charge $15, $25, $30 to check into your property a few hours early. And other, you know, luxury properties are charging, you know, $75, $100, $200 even sometimes, which is pretty amazing for them. But I think the thing to remember about this is high margin dollars. These fall directly to the bottom line, right? If they put in a request for an early check-in through, you know, the text message that they got before they arrived, if the hotel has the room clean, it's already set up for them. There was a decent shot they were going to give that person an early check-in anyways when they arrived at the front desk. But now you've given the opportunity for a consumer to self-select and say, I'm willing to pay you $25 to get into my room. So what you were just about to give away for free, you just made $25 that went directly to your bottom line. And we talk about this with hoteliers all the time, because we see the data behind this, and it's phenomenal. I think it's a really good call out, Ron.
Good one.
Well, it satisfies another end of that, which is we hear all the time, it's very frustrating from customers that they arrive at a hotel at noon and say, sorry, check-in isn't until 3 o'clock, when we know there's room sitting there vacant. So it's actually putting a monetary value to that and incenting hotels to get guests check-in rather than have them wait around the lobby or do other things because it's convenient for our hotels.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, if I may say so, we only have a few more minutes left. I'd like to take you on a little trip down the line here. So we're talking efficiency and operational efficiency. So it's very much now, and now I'd like to think, we've just asked luxury and frugality. Now I'm talking about operational efficiency versus what needs to happen in the medium term and long term. And so, as you know, you've been traveling and so on, there's a lot of talk about all the climate issues, and there's decarbonization, there's retrofittings of our properties, etc. So where are the frictions here in terms of, I need to stabilize my cash flows now, which means I need to look at the input. Where do I control my labor, my energy, my everything? I need to think about the output in terms of how do I generate that revenue. But in between stabilizing all of this, there is the longer term. So what do you recommend your hoteliers? Do you also support them in thinking there is some stuff that needs to be done in terms of investment, for example? And how do you guide people through operational efficiency, but looking at the medium term and the long term? Is there anyone who wants to pick this up before we have to do our last round around? You knew I was going to ask this because this is the field I do so much research, so I had to ask a question. Biran, are you hoteliers looking down the future as well, saying, I need to invest in this, or what's the situation?
They're looking at the future, but it's so hard to gauge really because of the inconsistency, right? I think that until corporate travel starts coming back, it's hard to kind of gauge your cash flow. Right now, you know, in the States, a lot of markets had great returns or great revenue in March, April, May, right? And the summer months look even better. But with the labor situation, and without until corporate travel comes back, it's hard to figure out. I think hoteliers got to forecast better last year when they knew it was a downtime and they could cut costs with their employees or furlough or whatever they need to do compared to now, right? It's been really tough. A lot of hoteliers I saw during last year did their renovation, right? They knew the occupancy was going to be down. They might have had a PIP coming up soon, and they spent the resources to upgrade their property. So when we come out of this pandemic and the road to recovery, we hit the ground running. And I think that was probably smart for a lot of people, because now that occupancy picking back up, you have to do a renovation in the next year or two to make the money that you lost in 2019 or 2020.
Right. Right. Ron, same thing at Best Western. Is that what you've seen? You've seen a round of renovations and upgrading over the past 12 months?
We've seen some of that. It was certainly not as strong as what we had in some of the past years, but those that had, as Baran said, had strong cash positions in their hotels took that opportunity to renovate and are certainly reaping the benefits of that now. To your earlier question about, you know, keeping the whole sustainability in front of mind, I think we can learn and continue to learn a lot from Europe. You're much further ahead of that technology and quite honestly mandates than what, you know, we see in the States and to some extent in Asia. But, you know, as we look at the next round of capital investments that hotel operators will be making, we're looking to make sure that our supply team provides them with the most efficient, you know, resources and technology that's out there to do that, including, you know, split systems with heating and cooling and the things that really, you know, laundry with ozone equipment, just the things that can drive down operating costs through less energy usage.
Okay, last round, gentlemen, because we're just a few minutes away. Haman, one perhaps last statement, and then we'll go around the table quickly. Ron and Biran. Haman, what are the tips you would say right away? I would imagine get some of those basic technologies in. What is the last tip?
Well, I feel like I have to play the role here of being an advocate for technology at hotels. But, you know, I think, you know, just real quick on the last point that you made, Willie, I think, you know, both short and long term, there's a lot of strategies that hoteliers that are able to deploy to kind of drive down costs, drive up revenue. I don't think, you know, I wouldn't be looking, there's not going to be a silver bullet that's just going to solve everything. So I think thinking about how do these different strategies stack on one another, right? Technology is just one lever that you can employ to try to help here. But thinking about it as a force for good at your properties, I think is something that a lot of hoteliers are starting to think about right now.
Biron, last word.
Yeah, I think that the brand partners need to continue working with the franchisees because as costs continue to go up, as I mentioned earlier, the profit margins are kind of going down. And so we need to kind of make sure that this industry stays lucrative and people want to continue being in it, right? The pipeline is still, it's still there. And right now it's a seller's market. There's assets that are trading at, pretty high numbers here in the States.
Yep.
So I think that the demand is there, optimism is there. And at the end of the day, we're a resilient industry, right? We here in the States, we went through 9/11, we went through the financial economic crisis, and we got through it. This is something that's health related that we have gone through that nobody expected, but I think we'll come out of it sooner than later.
Very good. Thank you very much, Biron. And Ron, last word for the day.
Yeah, I think I have to concur with Baran. This is going to be an uneven recovery that we've seen and will last at least 6 to 12 months, but there is light at the end of the tunnel. We've survived the worst that's ever happened to us in the business, and this is a great industry, and it will succeed both short-term and long-term, and people should not shy away from jumping back into it.
Thank you very much to the three of you. It's been great talking to you. I wish we'd have a bit more time, but we've done the best with the time we've had. I join you or join us on this platform for networking afterwards. Thank you very much. I wish you a great day wherever you are. And until next time, see you.
Thanks so much for moderating, Willie.
Thank you, Willie.
Bye.